For 30 years, the nuclear submarines of the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a menacing game of hide and seek, carrying the threat of instant annihilation right to the shorelines of their enemies. On one of these deadly patrols, a disaster hurls 100 crewmen into a nightmare at sea. The Soviet sub K-219, armed with enough nuclear firepower to destroy the world, explodes in a lethal mixture of fire, water, and poisonous gas. Her captain and crew must risk their lives in the effort to avert a nuclear catastrophe just 1,200 miles off the coast of America. September 3rd, 1986, Northern Fleet Base, Gadjevo, USSR, home port for most of Russia's 84 boomers, a Navy term for missile-carrying submarines. It is one of the most tense periods of a Cold War that has lasted for more than a generation. The Soviet submarine force is twice as large as the American fleet, sending a clear message to Washington that a nuclear war might be won beneath the sea.
We had to regain a great deal of strength because the Soviets had a marked edge in almost every area of potential conflict, in the air, under the sea, and on land. So we had to catch up very rapidly. That's always much more expensive. It's always much more risky, and we had to go a long way.
In the Soviet fleet, aging craft like the K-219 make up the bulk of an overworked arsenal, known to American intelligence as the Yankee-class. K-219 has been in Cold War service for 15 years. This Yankee is longer than a football field, capable of maneuvering within a few hundred miles of the U.S. coast, and launching 16 unstoppable nuclear missiles toward American military and metropolitan targets. At the bow, 18 torpedoes to sink American warships in underwater combat. The Central Command Post, or CCP, the sub's nerve center. At the heart of the sub, nuclear missiles, each with a different U.S. target and the power to kill millions. Further aft, the atomic reactors that allow the sub to stay submerged for months without refueling. Finally, the rear machinery room with an emergency escape hatch. 0800 hours. Commander Igor Britanov takes K-219 out into frigid Arctic waters.
This mission was similar to the 12 missions I had already accomplished. It was a combat patrol, maintaining constant readiness in the event that we received orders to launch a nuclear strike. We were to cross the Atlantic Ocean, make our way toward the coast of the United States, patrol in waters around Bermuda, and finally return to our base. Usually, such a patrol takes 75 to 80 days.
K-219's missiles carry enough destructive power to obliterate all human life from New York City to Norfolk, Virginia. It is a threat that the United States cannot and does not ignore. American hunter-killer sub shadow the Soviet boomers, racing to stay within torpedo range in case of war, to destroy the Russian ship before her missiles can be fired.
American submarines had orders to hunt our subs down. They were everywhere, deployed from the Barents Sea near our coast all the way down to the areas we patrolled in the Central Atlantic. They could detect us literally anywhere. My main responsibility as the commander was to do all I could to detect these American submarines and, if possible, escape them.
Sending out K-219 is a Soviet countermeasure to a new American threat. In the mid-1980s, Pershing and Tomahawk nuclear missiles menaced the Soviets with instant destruction from launch sites in Western Europe. Russia's response? Double missile sub-patrols in the Western Atlantic. K-219 is assigned twice as many long-duration missions and serviced half as often. Crews are hastily assembled, and Captain Britanov finds himself commanding a squadron of strangers. He barely knows many of the 119 men aboard. One of them is a young nuclear reactor expert named Nikolai Belikov.
This was not our ship. We were assigned to this sub at the last moment, literally a month before the mission. All our training and preparation had been conducted on another submarine. We were transferred to this ship and had very little pre-mission time to ready ourselves for our combat duty. The technical condition of the submarine was, well, satisfactory.
K-219 is designed to carry 16 missiles, but one hatch is welded shut after an accident at sea. A constant reminder that this old boomer is past her prime. A corps of veteran officers must keep her on course, including navigator Yevgeny Aznabayev.
Our main objective was to remain undetected. We were constantly on the high combat alert, ready to launch our nuclear missiles. No point making a secret about it now at the United States.
It is Aznabayev's job to guide 219 toward America, without America knowing where she is. One of the finest nuclear engineers in the fleet, Gennady Kapitulsky, is responsible for K-219's fickle, aging reactors. Kapitulsky is mentor to a young submariner from a tiny northern village, Sergei Preminin.
Sergei Preminin was one of the seamen in our crew. He was a young man, only about 20 years of age. He was that kind of man that keeps Russia together and keeps the Russian Navy together. One of those simple, responsible, and confident young men that makes Russia and its Navy what it is.
As the long voyage begins, each compartment reports its readiness to the captain. But weapons officer Alexei Petrachkov hesitates. Missile silo number 6 shows a slight leak. Petrachkov knows that when seawater contacts rocket fuel, the result is deadly nitric acid that could cause a missile fuel tank to blow up. But Petrachkov also knows the entire crew would be punished if a failure in his department were responsible for aborting K-219's mission. He decides to say nothing. At his command post, Britanov issues the order to dive. A last breath of fresh air before their scheduled 3 months, submerged, on a stealthy combat patrol.
Внимание всем системам и отсекам. Проверить шпар.
Есть проверить шпар. Замечаний нет.
Номер 1.
Проверить шпар.
Есть проверить шпар.
Что у вас здесь?
Captain Britanov knows the deep water game of cat and mouse has already begun. The Soviet submarine may have been spotted by an American hunter-killer lurking just off the Russian coast.
Hey, we've got another one. It's a Yankee.
Colin, this is Sonar.
Sonar, con.
We have contact at heading 270. It is a Yankee. Repeat, it is a Yankee.
Understood.
Make your depth 200 feet. Make my depth 200 feet. Aye, sir.
During the height of the Cold War, at any given time, the United States Navy probably had a minimum of about 6 submarines somewhere in the world on intelligence collection missions. That number could reach a high of as many as 12 or 15. The missions were specifically targeted against a variety of activity. And that activity could range from a particular Soviet submarine's operating patterns, trying to determine those, to going against a national target, which might be communications intercept, to collecting acoustic intelligence on a variety of targets.
The U.S. Navy will not disclose if K-219 was under surveillance as it left the Soviet Arctic. The missions of American hunter-killer subs remain classified. September 5th, 1986. Britanov knows he is approaching the sophisticated American surveillance network known as SOSUS. Hundreds of thousands of tiny microphones on the ocean floor filter out cargo vessels and whale songs to detect the signature engine noises of Soviet nuclear subs. It is Britanov's challenge to sneak through.
We tried to beat the SOSUS system by making it more difficult to identify the sound of our submarine. There are ways to do this. For example, we could get through the detection system by running just below the surface in a storm and masking our sounds in the noise of the waves. We could ride in the wake of a noisy ship.
For 2 days, Britanov guides his submarine in the wake of a Russian freighter, a delicate and dangerous maneuver. The tactic works. Of the 6 Soviet submarines deployed in the Atlantic at this time, only one escaped SOSUS. K-219 has broken free. October 1st, 1986. After 4 weeks beneath the Atlantic, K-219 has completed 1/3 of her nuclear patrol. For her 119 crewmen and officers, the mission is a monotony of work, sleep, and caution. One man aboard is part of that caution. Valery Shenishny is a KGB agent assigned to monitor the crew and guard against sabotage.
During a long mission in enclosed quarters, a person's mentality can change. People get homesick, and they can't stand to be in the cramped space of a submarine. So, in order to get home faster, they sometimes do damage to the sub's equipment. Certain people can do this in a certain psychological state. Therefore, it is the mission of the security officer on board to inform the sub's commander of those individuals who could potentially do harm to the sub.
Britanov has sneaked through the SOSUS microphones, but now he must evade the American attack subs that roam the Atlantic like hungry sharks. To rattle them, he orders a risky roller coaster ride that the Americans call a Crazy Ivan.
Soviet contact, dead ahead, sir. Ears open, sonar.
There were various methods of finding out whether our sub was being trailed by an American boat. One way was to sharply increase the speed up to about 24 knots and keep going at that speed for some time. If an American submarine were trailing us, it would have to speed up too, to keep up with us. And as a result of all kinds of noises, it would lose its capacity to hear us. Then, after a while, we would sharply slow down to 0, turn around, and listen to the American sub rush by like a freight train.
Con, sonar, Crazy Ivan.
Crazy Ivan, all stop.
Break for quiet.
Break for quiet, aye, sir.
The Soviets hear nothing.
Of course, as on any patrol, we did everything we could to avoid being detected on that mission. And we routinely checked to see if we were being hunted. However, we did not notice anyone tracking us. Either our maneuvers were faulty, or there just wasn't anybody in trail.
October 3rd, 1986. K219 is 300 miles east of Bermuda. The submarine creeps close to the surface, bringing in a radio communication from fleet headquarters. The message is received. K219 must return to her hiding place in the deep. But as the aging sub begins to dive, the change in outside pressure triggers one of the Cold War's most chilling disasters.
Юрий, скорее сюда!
Water floods into the leaking silo. Alarms sound throughout the ship. Suddenly, Captain Britanov is aware of the grave problem Weapons Officer Petrachkov chose not to report.
I called the missile compartment commander and demanded a report on the situation. He did not answer me. But through the intercom, I could hear the crew working. I could tell that they were already using pumps to drain the leaking silo. I was beginning to realize that something serious was going on back there. I decided immediately to take my sub toward the surface, where it would be safe to sort out the problem.
It is too late. Corrosive seawater eats through the thin skin of one nuclear missile. Its fuel tank explodes in a deadly brew of flame, water, and poison fumes. Thousands of gallons of water surge through a gaping wound in the submarine's outer shell. The sub is sinking. Britanov decides that to save his men, he must ignore his strict orders to remain hidden in the ocean. He must get his submarine to the surface, or 119 men are doomed.
My mechanic and I simultaneously screamed out the same orders to blow all the ballast and get the sub to the surface. It was an emergency. Who knew how bad the damage was? Maybe there was a hole through the side.
The crippled sub strains against the tremendous pressure of the ocean. She violently breaches the surface. In the weapons room, the flooding eases and the fire is out. But poisonous fumes from the missile fuel tank choke the crewmen caught inside. Their lungs gurgling and foaming. 3 of them die before the rest are pulled to safety. Petrechkov's decision not to report the leak has cost him his life. The punctured missile compartment is in the center of the submarine. Poison gas pours through compartment after compartment behind the damaged area. KGB officer Valery Shenishny orders 60 men to flee for clean air at the rear of the sub.
I heard the emergency alert. I ran out of the compartment asking, "What's happened?" At that precise moment, the commander announced to the intercom, "Maximum alert, poison gas is coursing through the sub." I felt, as the expression goes, that my whole life was going before my eyes.
Beyond a sealed door, the KGB man and half the crew are safe. For now. Britanov orders navigator Ajnabayev to send an emergency plea for help to fleet headquarters in Russia, 5,000 miles away. Moscow's instructions are cruel but clear. Keep the crew on board despite the danger, and wait for assistance from Soviet cargo vessels. Even though the nearest ships are 2 days' sail away, the Americans must not get their hands on K-219 and her deadly nuclear arsenal.
In October of 1986, I was the senior intelligence officer for the U.S. Atlantic Command based in Norfolk. This particular morning, when I came in, my watch officer showed me some ship tracks that indicated some merchant ships had significantly deviated from their planned routes.
Schaefer knows that Soviet subs are in the area. He suspects the merchant ships have been diverted to assist a sub in trouble.
At that time, then, I recommended to our operations people that they launch the ready-duty P-3 Orion ASW aircraft that we had in Bermuda and send it to the location that I specified, and I felt there was a good possibility when they got there that they would find a Soviet submarine in some distress.
Schaefer's hunch is correct. His aircraft records a sight never before filmed in 4 decades of Cold War. A Soviet nuclear missile sub, stranded and smoking on the surface. She appears helpless, unable to move. And the brown fumes that are seeping from her shredded skin hint at contaminated conditions below. The images reach a fascinated audience in Ronald Reagan's Washington.
In 1985, I became the director of the White House Situation Room. It is an alert center in the White House that serves multiple functions, most of which deal with processing incoming information that is important to the White House staff, the National Security Council. Having come from the Navy and being grounded in naval intelligence, I was lucky and able to call the Director of Naval Intelligence and ask him personally to send over some pictures because I knew the President would be interested in seeing a Soviet submarine on the surface. And I was right, he was interested.
There is another reason for intense American interest. Though the incident remains classified, there is speculation that the leak in the Soviet sub was caused by a collision with a U.S. nuclear submarine. The sub in question is one of the Navy's finest hunter-killers, USS Augusta. 3 weeks after the disaster, an American newscast reports that Augusta has suffered severe damage, the result of a collision with a Soviet sub.
The submarine Augusta is being repaired under this dry dock shed in Groton, Connecticut. Pentagon sources now reveal that chances are good the Augusta collided with a Soviet sub. The collision caved in a portion of the hull and damaged the nose covering which houses the sub's sensitive sonar and guidance systems. Damage is estimated at $1.5 million.
Vice Admiral Dan Cooper was commander, submarine force for the Atlantic in 1986. He admits only that Augusta was in the area.
The Augusta at no time had a collision with that particular submarine. There was no other submarine of our nation anywhere near there before or during until the Augusta got out near with orders merely to observe.
What did the Augusta hit? Soviet naval authorities say it may have been another of their subs, sent to assist K-219. Even Captain Igor Britanov of K-219 does not believe he hit the Augusta.
There is no way I can support this theory. There was nothing to indicate another sub's presence. I want to stress this word, nothing. There were no traces of a collision, no sounds, no creaks, no groans. I know how it feels when you hit something.
In Washington, the U.S. Navy reports that K-219 poses no danger to America. President Reagan receives an extraordinary personal message from Mikhail Gorbachev. The Russian leader assures Reagan that there is no chance of a nuclear disaster. But Gorbachev does not know what is happening aboard his own submarine. Poison gas is seeping toward the crew's refuge at the stern. Rubber door seals are being corroded by heat and acid. Each crewman is issued a mask and emergency oxygen canisters, but each canister lasts only 10 minutes, and there are only 30 left. Then, another crisis.
At first, there were no signs of fire aboard the sub, but soon small fires began being detected in certain places, and then somewhere in the fourth compartment, a serious fire began. This fire destroyed the hydraulic system and damaged the reactor control panels. Both of these are located in that compartment number 4. Following my orders, the crew now had fires to fight. The situation went from bad to worse. Fire in the 4th, fire in the 6th, sparks flying in the 8th.
Temperatures in the crew compartments reach 130 degrees. As the fire spreads, the nuclear reactors begin to overheat. The worst of all submarine nightmares is coming true. The reactors must be shut down. If they burst, the explosion will kill everyone on board, and an underwater Chernobyl will be unleashed in the Atlantic. But the control rods that can cool the atomic reaction are stuck in the open position by the heat. Captain Britanov knows he must ask one of his crewmen to risk his life to save the others. He selects Nikolai Belikov.
We knew that the position of the rods given certain conditions could result in a nuclear disaster. There was no choice. The commander ordered us to lower the 4 baffles to their safe, locked positions.
No one in America knows the drama that is being played out 1,200 miles from America's shores. Only Belikov and young Sergei Preminin are qualified. to deactivate the reactor. Radiation levels are high enough to render the men sterile, despite their protective suits. But there is no other way, no other choice.
The first time I went into the reactor compartment on my own. The heat was intense. It was more than 50 degrees Celsius. I struggled down to the reactor and managed to lower one baffle. Just then, my oxygen canister ran out. I went back in for a second attempt, this time with Seaman Preminin. Between us, we managed to lower the next two baffles. Just as I began working on the fourth baffle, I began to suffocate. We were out of oxygen once again. We had to get out of there fast. Preminin and I stumbled to the 8th compartment, and that's when I lost consciousness.
Britanov and Shinishny know there is no alternative. Preminin must go back in. He is the only man who knows his way around the reactor room. Preminin does not need to wait for Britanov's command. The lives of over 100 crewmates and countless unknowing Americans are in the hands of one Russian farmer's son. One more rod remains to be wrestled into place. With superhuman strength, Preminin shuts down the reactor. The door leading to his comrades and his own survival will not open. The air pressure created by the heat of the reactor room has jammed the hatch. The young hero is trapped.
Реактор закрыт.
I told him not to talk in order to conserve his remaining energy and his last gasps of oxygen.
Последние глотки кислорода, которые у него остались, и порекомендовал ему просто постукивать переговорным.
In order to communicate, I told him to tap on his microphone and let us know that he was still alive and understood our orders. But in a few moments, I heard sobbing through the intercom. We all heard it. I realized that Sergei was tearing off his mask. He was probably out of oxygen and he was suffocating. Then the knocking stopped, as well as my communication with him. He died in that compartment, suffocating, sacrificing his life for the lives of the whole crew. These were the last minutes of Sergei Preminin. What Belikov and Perminin did, I don't know how to describe it. Physical and moral heroism. He paid with his life for a great deed.
Off the coast of Bermuda, 2 sleepless days pass on the crippled K-219. The Soviet cargo ships have arrived, but their orders from Moscow are preposterous. The crew must stay on board, accept no help from the Americans, and tow the K-219 back to Russia.
The towing speed was limited to just 3 or 4 knots. That's very slow. Just try to calculate how long it would take, considering that the distance to the base was almost 7,000 kilometers.
Aboard K-219, Captain Britanov faces another lethal crisis. The heat in the missile compartment continues to rise. 15 nuclear weapons could explode all at once, a disaster as deadly as a reactor explosion. Britanov is completely cut off from his men. 4 are dead, but 115 are still alive. The captain decides to disobey Moscow and to sacrifice his own career to save his crew.
After consulting with the mechanic, we came to the conclusion that the fire in compartment 4 could cause the missiles in that compartment to explode. This meant death to the sub and the entire crew. Considering this was a real possibility, I decided to move the crew to the Russian merchant vessel and stay behind, alone.
The emergency hatch leads to clean air and safety. Shinishny directs more than 100 survivors to the Soviet freighter. They leave one life raft tied to the bow for their captain. Britanov will be alone for the long tow home, knowing his sub could blow apart at any moment.
Why did I stay? Well, first of all, as long as the sub is afloat, it is the commander's responsibility. It's his ship. He cannot leave it. It is my ship. There is another reason I stayed. There were American airplanes overhead. Someone even saw a sub's periscope. There was an American tugboat. And if I abandoned my ship, the Americans might have boarded it and claimed it. This ship was mine.
For 10 hours, the Soviet freighter tugs the crippled submarine east. The process is agonizingly slow, but the makeshift tow line is holding. Then, in the dead of night, something goes wrong.
Somewhere between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., which was the darkest time of the night, suddenly the tow line snapped, and it snapped at its deepest point. It did not break at the freighter's stern or at the sub's bow. And since there was an American sub there, Augusta, I believe that they cut our tow line. Either they rammed it with their conning tower or with their hull.
The U.S. Navy denies that the risky and provocative maneuver took place.
If a U.S. submarine had been sent to the area of K-219 to conduct surveillance of the activity, again, because of the rules and the laws of the seas, it would never get close enough to the activity related to the casualty or to the merchant ships to in any way interfere whatsoever with the ongoing activity.
Alone on a drifting and dying vessel, in one of the most intense moments of the Cold War, Captain Britanov must make a decision. So close to the American shoreline, there is only one safe place for K-219, the bottom of the sea. Observers and submarine experts speculate Britanov flooded K-219. If he did, Britanov himself will never say.
When I saw that the seawater had come up to almost 5 feet from the top of the conning tower, I knew that the sub would sink in a matter of seconds. I took down the ship's flag and jumped into a raft. I looked back and saw the stern and the screws lift up above the water. That was the last time I saw it. It wasn't sinking vertically, it was sinking like this. And then the screws disappeared.
"1,200 miles from the American shore, the most heavily armed vessel to ever sink plummets 4 miles down to the ocean floor." October 9th, 1986. 115 survivors of the Soviet sub K-219 arrive at the port of Havana in communist Cuba. For them, it is a dizzying tropical dream. Two days later, Moscow offers a far colder reception. Political officers escort the crew to a rest facility for interrogation. Captain Britanov is received not as a hero, but as a renegade.
I got a distinct feeling that both the Navy and the military were looking for a scapegoat, trying to blame someone for the disaster. This is exactly what happened. They blamed everything on us. Everything was our fault. There were no problems whatsoever in the Navy, no technical problems with the sub. Then I was ordered on a vacation. When I came back, I learned that my political officer had been dismissed. Now it was my turn. I was dismissed from the Navy as unfit for service.
Britanov faces life in prison, but fate intervenes. Right outside Red Square, a young German aviator lands a small aircraft and makes a laughingstock of Soviet security. Heads roll in the Soviet military, and a new, more progressive leadership pardons Igor Britanov. Today, Britanov and his crew are fighting to reclaim his reputation as an unsung hero of the Cold War.
I don't know how a different commander would have acted. I can't possibly comment on this. But I believe that my task of saving the lives of the crewmen, I fulfilled. I wanted to save them, and I did.
Sergei Preminin is honored with a posthumous Red Star for his bravery. His father and mother accept his award and the gratitude of the men whose lives he saved. In 1987, the Soviets ceased their Yankee submarine patrols off America. Glasnost is on the horizon. Now their deadly vessels, which once threatened America with instant annihilation, lie broken and rusting in a Russian harbor. The men who sailed and suffered in them have not been forgotten. On the walls of a church in St. Petersburg, Russia, public tribute has finally been paid to the casualties of a deadly contest beneath the sea. Men who died in silence in a secret war. Victims of accidents and incidents never mentioned in the Soviet press. In the terror of mutual destruction, the submariners of both nations held the trump card of peace. and the world can now honor them and their comrades who will never sail home.